Right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Environment Committee of Worcester City Council. Just have a pre-prepared script that I just have to read out at the beginning. This is a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording, and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note, this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed. Once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. So, just before we start, just want to say this is our final Environment Committee before May's elections, and I know Bill, you'll be leaving us then. So thank you for your contributions to the committee, and likewise Tom, as Vice Chair. Contributed greatly to the process, so good luck to both of you, and thank you for activity. I don't know if there's anyone else that's relevant to. Okay, so on to agenda item 1, appointment of substitutes.
We have no substitutes, Chair, but we do have apologies from Councillor Cleary.
Okay, and agenda item 2, do we have any declarations of interest? Take that as none. Agenda item 3 is public participation. I understand we have Mr. Alfrey. So you have 5 minutes.
Hello, good evening. I was presented with a well, I don't know if it's a letter or no, memorandum in relation to some of the problems that I've raised on previous occasions. It doesn't really, I don't think, take us very much further forward. I should have brought that, well, I don't have spikes anymore. The way the people of St John's have been treated is really shabby, a shabby business in my mind. We didn't have very much in that district, but we did have a recreational area. The planning authority consent was granted on the understanding that a replacement area would be provided before any, well, I believed more than 10 of the habitations were occupied. Now, they've all been occupied for over 6 months now, and those people have still got nowhere to exercise their dogs. The place is, well, some people said it was a tip before, but it is now. And there doesn't seem to be any sign that we're going to get anything done. The way that we've been treated on the allotments is even worse, I think, because I'm personally involved there. We've had the road remade. I was given an assurance by Richard that it would be as good as what it was before in relation to being able to walk round there or cycle round there. You could cycle around the site previously. Now it's a nightmare. Anyone thinks that is just gravel that hasn't consolidated or broken down is totally mistaken. It was totally unsuitable material. It is dangerous. I'm a doddery old fart now, but I find it is, you've got to really watch where you're going the whole time. And if you fell over, the stones there are as sharp as, well, sharper than nails because they got long edges on them. And we're going to have a sign to say, don't drive fast. Well, that's not going to save anyone. Does the council's insurance cover you because you've put notices up? We can't, weeds are growing in the path. You'd be mad to try and trim that with any mechanical machine, because it would it will do damage to most grass cutting machines, and there is a danger that if they can be thrown up by vehicles, they'll be thrown up by a strimmer or something like that. We need something done. And I don't care what anyone says, there were maybe no potholes, but it's not safe for anyone to walk on that's not of really sound and agile. The gates we were promised would have built-in key padlocks. They then suggested they were going to put a sliding gate there. They were going to produce drawings for it. All they've done is taken away the existing gates and put bigger gates up that are not nearly as good a quality. The fastening mechanism is not as good as the original one. If you think you're going to put built-in locks on them, you can't do that on two gates that come together. You've got to have them, one of the gates going up against a solid, firm post with the lock built in. So we're going to end up with just a thing. The other gate, at last, we've got it, thanks to Robin's work, we've got it levelled off. There was a trip hazard there. It's now level, but you can't open the gate fully at one way because they haven't taken the post back far enough. The other way, you open the gate into the roadway.
I'll just ask you to sum up now, please.
Have I done my time?
No, if you just want to sum up and then that'll be your time.
Right.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know whether it says anything about the quality of the employees on the property department, but I think most people will recognise, whilst 25 and 25 make 50 when you add them together, when you have a 25 millimetre pipe and another 25 millimetre pipe, it does not do the same as a 50 millimetre pipe. So we want that done. There was no need for them to have dragged the pipe out. They could have easily lowered it in the area. They needed to put a drain over the top of it. But they just dragged the pipe out and put another pipe in round the perimeter of the thing.
Okay.
They knew the size of the pipes before they connected them up.
Mr. Alfred, I'm going to have to stop you there because you're giving you a bit of
See you
extra
next
time.
month.
Okay. Sorry?
After your elections, anyway.
Yeah, so, well, thank you for coming and presenting your concerns, and I'll ask officers to give you a response. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, on to agenda item 4, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of January. Do we have any comments on the minutes? I'll take them page by page. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7. Okay then, so I'll take that as an accurate record. So, we're on to agenda item 5, where we have a we're on to agenda item 5, where we are very pleased to have the Chief Executive Officer of Act on Energy, Rachel Jones, is going to brief us about her organisation. But before Rachel starts, I'm just going to hand over to Councillor Tom Collins, just because he's been the driving force behind Rachel coming here this evening. And so I'd just like to ask Tom to introduce this item.
Thank you, Andy. Yes, so where this probably started is with our environmental sustainability work. and our ambition to reduce the city's carbon emissions. Our strategy has identified that the two big sources of emissions in the city are transport and heating buildings. And whereas transport can be quite hard for us to impact as a council, there might be things we can do around buildings. And I know from my own professional life that the social sciences research has shown local authorities are uniquely trusted. And we, therefore, as a local authority, have a unique opportunity to provide support and guidance to residents in the difficult area of knowing how to improve your building, your home. It's complicated, it's unfamiliar, and it's expensive. Where people feel very vulnerable, we actually, as an organisation, are trusted and have an opportunity to help people improve their heating. And actually, that confidence piece around knowing what to do and knowing that you're safe and secure doing it is probably the biggest barrier to people changing the way they heat and live in their homes and they insulate their buildings. I'm aware that we already do a lot in this space, but it has largely reached the social housing sector and not more widely. But actually now a national government are working hard to decarbonise, and we have the heat and building strategy. We're starting to see more support, more financial support coming from central government to help people decarbonise their homes. And so while that financial barrier is being removed by central government, it seems like just the right time for us to help remove the confidence barrier for consumers. So I wanted us to have a chance to hear what Acton are doing, who already work with us, and maybe as a committee think about what we could do in addition to use the trusted brand that is us as the City Council to provide really well-targeted support to homeowners to help them decarbonise their heating. So I'm very glad that Rachel's come, and I'm very happy to hand over to her. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak this evening. I think you've all had a copy of the presentation, but I'll sort of go through some of the key elements of that, and then hopefully that will sort of promote a bit of discussion afterwards. So just a little bit of background about us. So Acton Energy have been providing energy advice and support for 22 years. We were set up back in the late 90s, 1998, by Stratford-upon-Avon District Council to actually provide support to local authorities to help them deliver something catchily titled the Home Energy Conservation Act, or HECA, because the energy industry, a bit like most industries, has a great love for acronyms, and so there's plenty of those in them. In this industry, I will try and avoid them at all costs this evening, but if I do slip into the world of acronyms, then do feel free to ask me what on earth that stands for, and I will try my best to remember. So as an organisation, we became a charity a couple of years after Stratford set us up to provide energy support to residents across originally the Stratford district, and then we quite quickly realised that actually the need was much greater than just Stratford, and then we started to work across Worcestershire very, very quickly, and our sort of early adopters of working with us as a charity was Worcester City, Wychavon, Bromsgrove and Redditch. So the Worcestershire authorities particularly were very on board with this particular agenda. And for our organisation, our real key agenda is really about ensuring that we eliminate fuel poverty, and reduce carbon emissions. Predominantly our area of expertise is in home energy, so that's the area we really focus on, and where our real core value is that everyone has a right to live in a warm home that they can afford to heat with the minimum carbon impact. And at the moment, that's probably one of our key real agenda areas. I would say 99.9% of all our work at the moment is actually based on the fuel poverty agenda and people struggling to heat their homes at the moment. And that's probably been so for about the last 5-10 years or so, realistically. So our key aim and one of our key deliveries really is about empowering households so they can make informed energy decisions. I think that's one of our biggest challenges. We are still helping householders understand what a kilowatt hour of energy is, how much that actually costs them, and really going back to some of the basics, because unfortunately, really probably over the last 10-15 years, with the rising cost of energy, we really need to go back to some of those basics again, unfortunately, and providing the good old energy efficiency advice so people know exactly what they're using, so they can make the informed decisions about what they want to do in their homes, essentially. And so it's really, for us, it's about supporting householders in making the right energy decisions, but also helping them to navigate that very complex landscape of energy and funding. There's an awful lot of funding programmes around at the moment. As you rightly said, central government have pushed out quite a lot of funding streams, all of which have a plethora, again, of very catchy titles. We have the Local Authority Delivery Scheme, or LADS, and then we have the Home Upgrade Grant Scheme, HUGs. So we like an acronym that's, in this industry, as I said. But they're quite complicated schemes, and so for us, it's really helping householders understand what's available to them, what's going to be most suitable for them to help, one, reduce their bills and make their home warmer, but also help them on that transition towards a low carbon living, essentially. So we provide a number of different services to local authorities across all of the West Midlands now. We've actually over the last 18 months, we've grown as an organisation. Our predominant areas were Worcestershire and Warwickshire, and we've recently started to move out into the combined authority area, really, so Coventry, Solihull and those areas, and Birmingham. But everyone's got the same challenges, and so one of the key things we provide is the energy advice telephone line, so that people can call and get impartial advice around, predominantly at the moment, I have to say it's bills. People are really concerned about the price cap and how that impacts on their lives. What does it mean? What can they do? What should they do? And really trying to help them navigate some of the myths that are out there around electricity and gas. There's an awful lot of fear out there for households that actually are stopping using their gas systems and using electricity because they've heard that gas has gone up so much. So it's really talking with householders about the fact that actually gas is still your cheapest fuel, and that you need to just think about how you use it. Try and use less of it if possible, but also to make sure people aren't putting their health at risk by not heating their home correctly. So a lot of our work is around telephone advice, and then we spend a lot of time going out into the communities, events, presentations, talks. A bit more challenging when we had COVID, but things are starting to open up again, so we're starting to deliver those services again, which is really, really key, I think, for helping residents understand how they can use their home more efficiently and how to reduce their bills. And one of the areas we're starting to move in at the moment is what we call complex caseworkers. What we're just running a scheme that we're just trialling at the moment, and we're basing it around the social prescribing model. So actually just working quite closely with hopefully we're looking at probably somewhere in the region of about 150, 200 households a year, just to try and stop that revolving door, because what we're finding at the moment is the same people are coming back year on year on year, and we really want to try and empower those people so they haven't got to keep coming back to us to make the right decisions about energy and where they go forward. So what we're trying to do is deal with that crisis that people are dealing with at the moment, that the issue around the price cap, and then look at what they can do to make ongoing energy decisions, and really looking at that carbon agenda, that household retrofit agenda. So we actually have in-house retrofit assessors and retrofit coordinators that can actually provide that process for householders, and it's part of the delivery package as part of the local authority delivery scheme, which Worcester City's been delivering now for over 12 months, really, so we can actually talk to householders about what does retrofit mean to them, how can it make their house warmer, what does that look like. And it's quite a challenge at the moment for householders really understanding what difference will it make if I put an air source heat pump in. Can I put an air source heat pump in? Should I be taking my gas boiler out? Should I be taking my electricity out? What should I be doing? What's best for me and my house? And for us, it's about providing that impartial advice, but starting off with the crisis now and then looking at the short, medium and long-term plans. And that's what the retrofit assessments do. So we're trying to move along that agenda area at the moment. Our key area at the moment is trying to make sure there's parity across the areas that we work in, and making sure everyone's got access to the same funding and the same grants that are out there. So that's our big challenge at the moment. So we offer a whole host of services to local authorities. As I say, the advice line, the basics, And then we offer a whole host of things in between there for individual local authorities, whether it be working with policy, climate change policy. We work quite closely as an organisation with the government department that specialises in this gender, so Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, BEIS, as we lovingly call them. So really referring back in and back out again about how the impact on the policy that comes out of central government, how is that actually delivered locally? So there's a piece of policy called the Energy Company Obligation, which is just about to go into another acronym, ECO4, so the Energy Company Obligation 4. How is that going to be delivered at a local level? What does that look like for Worcester? So at the moment we're working with BEIS on what that could look like from a local delivery perspective. But also, again, feeding back up the chain, going, actually, that bit of policy works really well there, but actually this bit doesn't work so well for certain households. So it's that trying to develop that two-way process to make sure that what is developed centrally can be delivered locally and that local households can benefit from that funding that's available. And that goes across the plethora of all the schemes that are coming out at the moment. I think that's probably one of the biggest challenge for councils at the moment, is that we are talking about billions of pounds that are coming out of central government, and the challenge at the moment is capacity. I think across 300 odd local authorities across the country who are all trying to deliver the same programmes, utilising the same supply chain, and so it's really just making sure that we're well placed as a city to know exactly how we're going to address that, and also working together with partners, both other local authorities, but also other organisations, to make sure we can try and provide the best access for residents, essentially. It's quite a big piece of work, energy. It's quite a huge subject. And so I just thought I'd sort of give you a brief overview of where we're at the moment. And then, you know, we certainly have colleagues if you want any more details about the whole retrofit process, because that actually is quite a detailed process in itself about how that actually works and the systems that sit behind it and the new legislation that sits behind retrofit. Because now any money or grants that are given for retrofit programmes have to be delivered in a very particular way, using a very particular piece of policy called Kpis. And so there's a whole number of acronyms and other acronyms that sit behind that, but I won't go into that now. So I don't know if anyone's got any questions on this agenda based on the presentation that was sent round.
Thank you very much, and also thank you for not just reading the slides, which is always great.
I'm dreadful because I lose my place where they are. So I thought, well, I'll just chat through.
Okay. Well, I've just got a couple of questions, and I'll open up the floor. And in its case, obviously, the key, the target here is obviously where you've got a combination of a low-income household and a poorly insulated home. Do we know how many of those households there are in Worcester, and of those, how many with, and approximation?
In the last 6 months, we've spoken to, I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head, I think we've spoken to about 600 residents from the city who've phoned up either to access the local authority delivery scheme phase 1, or the household support fund, which is the other scheme that we're actually running on behalf of the county council, but that's very much around bills and debt issues. We don't know 100% sure how many households in Worcester City need help. Have said there's still a big piece of work that needs to be done around what the stock looks like from an owner-occupier side of things, rather than the social, because obviously the social stock is pretty good in comparison. So it's really that private rented sector and then the owner-occupier sector, and really addressing those areas. We've got a rough idea of where the areas are. I think they're probably the areas that we all know, that most of it is in lower super output areas that we'd probably target. And we've got quite a lot of energy performance certificate data, so we use that to sort of target, and that's what we've done so far with the programmes, and we'll continue to do that. But a lot of it is just constantly getting the message out there. And I think the biggest challenge at the moment with the retrofit agenda is it's kind of been overtaken by the energy crisis and the price cap. So I think a lot of people are very much focused on how am I going to afford to heat my home, and this agenda is they want to look at it, but actually they're not quite ready at the moment to do that, because the concern is so great about the tsunami that's coming at them in October, where we are looking in addition to the 54% possibly another 20 to 30% increase. So, you know, energy bills of £3,000, I think is, you know, a terrifying outcome, I think, for a lot of residents. And we've certainly seen just from Worcester City, the average debt request we're getting through to the household support scheme is averaging about £700, which is substantial.
I'm curious, your website, when it talks about the grants, gives two mentions of Worcestershire, the super, Warmer Worcesters and Household Super Fund. Then it gives mention of other districts and even a village, but not Worcester. I wonder, is there a technical reason why Worcester's not included?
It certainly should be on there. Certainly should be on there. It certainly should be, because it's delivering. It's delivering the. I think it might be because we've done it through your own website directly. So
I wondered actually when I looked at it whether it was just a mistake, because Worcestershire's mentioned twice.
It might well be. I will have a look. I have to say, we are currently at the moment having a bit of a review on our website because of all these schemes have come up in the last 12 months that actually we need to try and space them out a little bit better on our website.
These things happen. Thank you.
Tom?
Thank you. Thanks for that, Rachel. That was a really good introduction. Thank you for taking the time and taking us through it all. You've obviously focused a lot on the social sector, let's say, low income, and the cost of heating aspect, and that's really important. So I'm interested to know, where are the bottlenecks there in the scale at which we're able to act? Because at the moment, you know, we make quite a small dent each year in that problem. And the second thing I'm interested in is probably what prompted all of this, which is now that the central government's releasing schemes, not just targeting low income, but targeting middle and high income, for example, boiler upgrade scheme. Are we able to scale up to then expand that offer to those people, the more empowered people in the owner-occupied sector, and meet the government's ambitions about energy transition? Or actually, you know, are we already bottlenecked on the social side and we've got nothing left to scale up with? I would like to understand, you know, where you see that.
Yeah, I think that there are some bottlenecks, definitely, with delivery of these schemes. Primarily, the supply chain is the biggest challenge that we're having at the moment, particularly as the schemes are quite specific about what you can and can't deliver. So they're very much based on average price caps of how much you can spend per property, bearing in mind the word average, and that is in itself can be quite challenging because it's a £10,000 average per property, but obviously that means you could spend 20 on one and couple of pound on the other, but then there's an issue around equity then, so that is quite a challenge about what you can deliver for that, because obviously one of the key things from our point of view is that we'd always try and do what we'd call a fabric first approach, so try and insulate the property to maximise the heat that's in the property and reduce heat loss and carbon that way, and then look at the heating and then look at things like PV, etc. But what we're finding at the moment, we're being driven towards the PV side of the schemes, primarily because we can afford to deliver that at scale, whereas things like wall insulation, particularly external wall insulation, which is where we're at now. I mean, across the whole of the UK, we've pretty much cavity wall insulated an awful lot of properties. There's still 5 million that do need insulating, so there's still quite a lot out there. But in the scheme of things, we've done a lot of that. So now it's the real hard do properties, and it's expensive at the moment, particularly with the new regime of how we have to install insulation. So we have to install to a very particular standard, which was set up to protect consumers, but it has, I would say, probably added a good 50% onto the cost of delivery. So that has made it quite a challenge. So things like external wall insulation is expensive, but also is the supply chain out there to do it? And that's the other challenge, not only the suppliers and the contractors to do it, but also actually physically getting the materials into the country. So those are the sort of challenges that we're feeding back centrally up to BEIS and particularly there's two or three departments, and sitting alongside the local authority delivery schemes, there is the energy company obligation, which is also going to be using the same supply chain. And then there's the social housing decarbonisation fund, which is obviously for social housing, but again, it's the same supply chain. And so that makes it, and they're all targeting predominantly vulnerable households, that group. And then, as you say, it's how, you know, the able to pay market is probably right at the bottom of that chain at the moment. So that is one of the biggest challenges, is how do we grow the green economy in Worcestershire? And I know it's something that certainly the county is looking at, and actually widen that, the West Midlands as a wider beast, are trying to look at how we can upskill the local supply chain. So there's a huge amount of potential for the local economy, but it's a big piece of work that needs to, you know, to be taken on board. And it means, I think we need these programmes to run over a longer period of time. So they're quite, as you all know from speaking to officers, they are quite, you know, you've got 6 months to spend this money, you've got 12 months to spend this money, and it's just a constant cycle, as actually we probably need 4 or 5 years to spend the money and spend it while utilising the local supply chain. Because that's the biggest risk, is that you end up having contractors that come from Scotland or, you know, whereas what we want to try and do is keep it as local as we possibly can. So those are probably one of the challenges of the supply chain. And then also, I think at the moment, it is for householders, it's their crisis is the energy at the moment. And people are very, very stressed, very, very concerned. Our call numbers have gone through probably, well, we used to probably take on average between 1,500 and 2,000 calls a year. Over the last sort of 18 months, 2 years, we're now up to just under 10,000 calls. Households. Now, admittedly, our area has grown, but even so, and the calls that we are getting are people are very, very concerned and don't quite know what to do. I mean, the Household Support Fund has been phenomenally helpful, but come March that ends, and that's probably one of our biggest concerns: is how do we help people come April, but more importantly, how do we help people come the winter time? Because that, I think, is where we're going to have the real challenge for residents. Well, that wasn't very cheery, was it?
No, thank you. It's really helpful for us to understand that. And this is getting a bit more practical about that crisis people are facing and helping us understand where we can and can't act. And I don't know about others listening, but I'm quite struck there by the whole skills gap, green economy piece, and whether there's something we can actually do in stimulating partners like Heart of Worcestershire College and others, to say we can, there is now a demonstrable gap and a demonstrable need, and there's funding and there's all the other parts of that economy are here. So if we can actually invest in filling that skills gap, the work will come, the jobs will come, and there's something to do. So that's really helpful, because as a committee, I hope that we find out, talking to you, what's the most helpful thing we could do, and maybe that's a very helpful thing we could do. Do you have any other, you know, talking to a local authority, what is it you guys always wish we would do? Maybe it's my final question.
I think for us at the moment, probably what we need more than anything else is support around, ironically, I'm going to say, is gas boilers, because come the term when we turn on central heating system in October, currently all the government funded schemes at the moment are for central heating systems that do not involve any fossil fuels. So they're all your air source heat pumps, which are fantastic. But if you're a householder that's on mains gas and your boiler breaks and you have no money, what do? You just do nothing, and you have a cold home, or you use plug-in electric, which is obviously, you know, from a billing point of view, is catastrophic for the householder, but it's not a good place. So that is one of the challenges that we have, and I think it's a really difficult one for local authorities as well, if we're trying to move away from mains gas, potentially, but actually it's still the cheapest form of heating out there for residents, and at the moment there is very little funding support out there to replace broken gas boilers. So that's probably one of the biggest asks would have. We try and get it where we can, but it's very, very limited. That's that sort of funding resource at the moment. So as much as we might not be that keen on putting gas into people's properties or keeping gas in there, I think it's probably at the moment the most sensible option going forward, to make sure that provision is put in place until we know exactly what's going to happen. with gas prices and electricity prices going forward.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, listening to that is quite interesting that you mentioned about putting in PV solar just because it's financially a more viable option, although it's not really addressing the fundamental problems of fully insulated homes. So I can see that being a sort of structural problem with the current system, as well as what you mentioned with supply chain and needing longer term funding streams if people are going to set up new businesses or retrain and reskill. How did most people find you? In terms of how do you communicate or advertise yourselves? And is that something again that the council could help with our own patient channels?
But most definitely, that would be really, really helpful. So we're, I have to say, we've grown quite a lot over the last sort of 18 months. We've gone from sort of 8 staff to 30. As of today, we have a new person start, so we're at 30 staff. So we've grown quite quickly, and we need to make sure that we are doing the promotion, and local authorities are really a key to that. And we're certainly looking at more around the social media and side to get the messages out there to residents. Unfortunately, most if anyone calls yourselves at the council, they generally, oh, that's the energy people, and they know, they know our number off by heart now, and they refer people directly to us. So we get an awful lot of referrals from local authorities, but also from the third sector as well. We try and work quite closely with partners across the city to try and make people aware. But obviously, the biggest challenge over the last 2 years is that we've not been able to do the out and about type work that we'd normally do. So if anyone knows of any events, we will happily turn up and talk to people. And that's one of the key things, is just getting out there and talking.
Thank you. Is there any other questions from anyone? Okay, well, thank you very much for coming along this evening. And on to agenda item 6, where we can welcome our honorary member of the committee, Paul Snooks. So the last committee, we had a public participation from Paul, where he gave us a very brief about the Wild About Worcester. But since then, we've had a sort of stakeholder briefing meeting here in this room a week or so ago. I'm sure Paul can tell us more about how many people attended, but it was a much fuller brief. So I've asked Paul to come back and give this committee a bigger brief, and with the aim that hopefully at the end we can ask officers to sort of formalise the council's role in supporting the project. So if the IT is ready, I'll hand over to Paul.
Thank you. This is the meeting we had about 10 days ago in this very room. About 30 people, councillors from almost all the parties, officers, and people from several different organisations like the Wildlife Trust, Duckworth Trust, about this 12-mile wildlife corridor around the city. It was incredibly positively received. We were really pleased. We are working with Onside, the mental health charity. They're very keen on this project to get people out in green spaces for their mental and physical health. As you well know, with Worcester Environmental Group, our focus is on biodiversity. The council have declared a biodiversity emergency, and that's very much the angle that we're coming from. You can see in the top right-hand corner of the picture there the proposed logo for this, 2 people reaching out with some leaves. Actually, that fits in really well. Onside have 2 people as their logo. We have 1 person holding the leaves. We brought it together rather brilliantly. So I say modestly myself, yes. So you can see the route there. It's not fixed in concrete. I shouldn't use that metaphor as an environmental group. But that's the proposed route at the moment. It connects lots of our green spaces you can see down there on the left. We've got lots of ideas on how we can enhance it for biodiversity and for people. We're hoping to have lots of events. Rather than just having events in the high street, we'd love to have events in some of the green spaces in the future so that people can discover some of those green spaces. We've started, courtesy of Councillor Andy Roberts, we've just put our very first bench along the proposed route with an inspirational carving on there by one of our volunteers. And so we're off to a good start. We're, as Andy has just mentioned, we're looking for support from the City Council with this project, and there we are. That's. I won't take too much more of your time. Are there any questions people would like to ask?
Louise, go for it.
Not a question, really. I just want to say a huge congratulations. We've known each other for a number of years. You've spoken about this a lot. A lot. So I just think, what a wonderful thing. And I'm really, really happy that you've pulled it all together, because I know what an important thing this is for you, and talking about, you know, the importance of nature and being outdoors for people's mental health and well-being. So
Thank you very much.
Richard?
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's what you've done so far is absolutely brilliant. But there's one glaring observation which I wish to make, and I'm not sure how you would like to respond to it. I think you know what I'm talking about.
I think I do. Yeah, it was this was raised. I think Robin, maybe you raised it. Somebody did. We would love to go through St John's. Unfortunately, we're trying to reduce the amount of urban road that we have to walk through. We can't at the moment find a way to extend it through St John's, where we would be walking through quite large numbers of those kind of streets. However, this, as I said, this isn't set in stone, and we're going to have set up a steering group, and it might be that we change the route anyway, and we'd be absolutely thrilled if we could come up with a route. But there is one thing that we are going to be doing. All along the route, there are wonderful opportunities to branch off out and into there, and we're hoping to have signage along the route saying, hey, have you considered going this way, Seven-Way, or into where there be dragons, or wherever. So,
If I very briefly may say, Chair, there is a route into St John's via the Douglas Bridge, which could actually follow the River Team, which is the city boundary, into St John's and up to the Lawnbrook Nature Reserve. But we'll discuss it at another time, maybe, because there is a route. We'll find a way where there's a will.
Great.
There's a way.
Okay, anyone else want to ask any questions of Paul or make any comments? Tom?
So what's the next step?
The next step, once we've got the endorsement of the City Council and City Council officers start working with us, we want to do this in stages. The first one would be to form a group, and a steering group, and to say, right, this is definitely going to be the route. And then the next step from that would be to have way markers along the whole route and produce a map that would be available electronically in places like the tourist information and so forth. That would be the first step, and then and it's a several-year project, in fact. But those would be the initial stages.
So if the committee's happy, what I'd like to do is ask officers to put together a paper on sort of establishing the council's role in supporting this project in terms of using existing resources in terms of the environmental ops teams in sort of small packages of work, and then also whether we could also allocate some funding from our environmental and sustainability budget, which we still have majority intact, and then to bring a paper back at a future committee to discuss.
I just want to ask one question. Is this going to be a walking route, or will it be blighted by cyclists coming up from nowhere behind you and scaring the living daylights out?
We had quite a debate initially about that. It will be a walking route. There are 2 or 3 areas of the proposed route where they're public footpaths and not for cyclists. Certainly, a big aim for Worcester Environmental Group is for people to connect with nature, and I think walking, you're going to connect with nature much more than you would cycling. However, there are quite a few stretches there that people can walk or cycle, but it will be predominantly, from our perspective, a walking route. Yes, that was raised actually. I think Robin did raise about the wheelchair. That would very much want that to be wheelchair accessible for the whole route, definitely.
I think the thing to remember is this is linking together existing paths and trails that already exist, but creating a defined route that then the biodiversity and natural habitats are enhanced, and then you add way markers information, so it becomes a sort of defined route, total route in its totality, rather than something new that's going to be sort of created out of nothing. These are all existing routes. Robin, did you want to say?
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief word. I know we've spoken offline about inclusion and accessibility, and I think that's something that we'll hope that officers will pick up on anyway with the new DEI initiative that's coming through. Thank you.
Okay, so if everyone's happy with that, we'll bring a paper to a future committee. So,
For the sake of the minutes, can we say that as I'm getting the mood through you, Chair, that as an environmental committee we're fully in support of what's being done?
Yeah, I'd be delighted to. So if everyone's happy that we do that, we'll minute our support and the future paper to come to a future committee. Okay, thank you very much, Paul. Thank you. On to agenda item 7, a cleaner and more pleasant city. This is an anti-litter campaign, and I believe, David, you're going to present this.
Thank you, Chair. The genesis of tonight's report is in a motion that was approved by Council back in September, which was around an anti-litter campaign, and the motion actually gave a number of examples from around the country, good practice and things that have worked elsewhere, and your officers have been away and looked at a number of those existing schemes. Successful, some have been less successful. And the report tonight brings to you some proposals that we'd like to take forward. So with you, Chair, I'll just run through briefly each of the main headings, and then I'll talk about a couple of the things that we've discounted following our research. So that the real heart of this will be a Love Worcester litter picking competition and campaign. Our communications team. And then initially a fortnight-long campaign we're proposing that would be in the build-up to the Platinum Jubilee Bank Holiday weekend. We've looked at some proposals to prizes that we could give out to the first 100 people to post their photographs of themselves picking litter, probably garden centre vouchers or cafe vouchers or something along those lines, up from existing budgets. Sponsors potentially. And also, members will be aware that BBC Hereford and Worcester ran the Proud to Pick litter campaign, which was really successful last year. Initial conversations, and we hope to link up with the media again on that and make that bigger and better again for 2022. And one of the things that we'd like to do, we've got a small stock of litter picking equipment that we lend out. We actually think with this campaign we would make much better use of that and actually invest in some additional litter pickers, make it easier for people to go out litter picking, families and individuals. So rather than sort of having a big established event where we're doing litter picking, to make these far more accessible, heavily promote this. We would look to make these as accessible as possible, so potentially using Worcester Community Trust premises where people could pick these up from. Also linking with the Duckworth Trust, that members will be well aware the Duckworth Trust does something similar. So we look to increase that if we could, and of course engage with ward members who have a really important role to play in helping the council to. Schools and engagement with schools is always key. With so we contact local schools, the head and the chair of the schools eco committee. Had a really good take up actually on our sustainability grants recently by contacting school heads directly. A real big interest in that. So there is a great interest in schools around the environment and We're also noting the Wrigley Company's Bin It campaign quite some time, educational session. So we would like to signpost that, take up that offer. Then the fourth part of that would be to really encourage Worcester businesses to take action on litter and engage with businesses. Good practice across the city. Particularly fast food outlets are associated with litter. To arrange meetings and go to see those businesses. Really encourage businesses what they could do to join our campaign. So it might be staff litter picks, it might be advertising, it might be throwing bins outside the premises. Potentially donation of prizes in the future. See the first year really as a start off and something we'd like to run as an annual event and potentially broaden it out from just 2 weeks. I mean, it's something really, it's a 12-month of the year issue. So those are what we're proposing that we put in. Just to run through a couple of the things that were suggested that we did look at and we're not proposing we take forward. The Loves Clean Streets app that was developed by Lewisham Borough Council has been around. It is a reporting app. There are two things here really. I mean, one is the real focus of this campaign is it's an anti-litter campaign. It's not a litter collecting campaign as such. It's not for the council to be reported to come and pick up litter. We want communities to play a big role in a partnership with this. And also something I think's emerged is probably a bit of app fatigue. I'm sure people are familiar with that. There's an app for everything. There are many apps that people end up downloading to their phones. The council has a really good online reporting system now through the website, along with all of its other services. And the website is mobile enabled and mobile compatible. So we think that works really well and really appropriate to pursue taking a separate app just for reporting. An Adopt a Street scheme is something that's been used by local councils but recently discontinued. where a school or a community group can sign an online pledge and adopt a particular piece of land. Quite a formal scheme and potentially quite a bureaucratic scheme to set up. I think informally, communities sort of adopt their own street that they live in anyway, and by promoting and making available resources, I think we can enable that without putting a layer of council formality around it. And also some discussion around enforcement and the role of enforcement within a campaign such as this. No, it is an offence to drop litter. There is a fixed penalty. Intensive activity can create a lot of interest, a lot of media interest, and can serve a role. But over a longer period, across the country, not a lot of fines get issued, really. The majority of people don't brazenly drop litter in open view. The role of our officers is not to follow people around waiting for them to drop litter, it's to patrol openly in public realm. So enforcement is a tool that is used by the council. Fly tips and littering will be acted upon if it's observed, but we're not proposing that as a central pillar of this. And then we also looked at campaigns that have been run in Essex and Kent, where they'd really put a large amount of money into targeting that 11 to 36-year-old age group. I think that actually the cost of that, the resources involved in it, probably aren't appropriate for us to pursue on our own as a district, as a city council. Promoting all of that through our existing channels is a effective way, and we think we can get a good hit and a good profile from that. So just to note that the proposals in the report are fairly modest expenditure. I mean, officer resources, and we've some existing budgets we can use. Take questions, Chair, and the proposals to the committee.
Yep, thank you very much. It's good to see a lot of sort of detailed research gone into looking at what's the most effective way of achieving our aims. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Lots. Let's go for Neil.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dave, for the report. Nice and loud, yeah. Sorry, Andy. Yeah, thank you for the report. I'm glad that we've done research into what other councils are doing. I always love it when that happens because it's pointless trying to reinvent the wheel. So nick the best ideas, I think it's the best thing to do. Just want to quickly relay a couple of suggestions from Councillor Lewing, who's had sight of the report, given that it's on the website. And those suggestions are, firstly, to encourage businesses to sign up to the Love Worcester campaign in two ways, having a sticker in their window possibly, and also on the City Council's website, those businesses could be listed as being in support of the campaign. So pretty simple suggestions, but you know, all helps with publicity for both us as a council and those businesses. So stickers and website profile for the Love Worcester campaign. And the second suggestion from Councillor Lewing was about using social media platforms. I appreciate that in the report there's a cost that other councils have put in, upwards of £20,000. But I agree that I think Worcester City Council could use TikTok, Snapchat, and possibly even Instagram at a very low cost, because the not being someone who uses these platforms, but just being aware of them, the content has been generated by the public and by businesses who are sharing their pictures and, you know, sharing their good work. So I do think there's a role for TikTok, Snapchat, and Instagram. It won't cost the council lots and lots of money. It would help with all the other suggestions. So I hope that's useful.
So thank you for the suggestions. We certainly take those away, and there's some really useful stuff there.
Robin next.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, with just another hat on, through you, Chair, ask if we can involve parish councils in this as well. Thank you.
Richard?
Yeah, Chair, I'm extremely disappointed because I was looking forward to going back to my youth and having a concert in Cribblegate Park from the Wombles, because that would certainly have generated a lot of the local interest, and I'm disappointed that that hasn't been a suggestion. But in absolute seriousness, I do wonder whether we looked at the possibility of celebrity endorsement to support such a campaign, such as a group from like the Wombles, a group which does cross the generations. I love them because I remember them as a kid, and the kids love them as well. And nothing would generate interest like Orinoco running through the streets of Worcester picking up litter. So it just may be something worth some sort of consideration. I'm also a little bit disappointed because there's a lot of intervention suggested, not a lot of prevention work. I can understand why it's easier to do litter picking than actually prevent somebody from dropping something down, but it's incredibly frustrating, as you can all tell a story, as I know, but I walked into Pitmaston Park only last weekend and found 4 large empty pizza boxes by the entrance, which were certainly attracting attention of passing dogs. So I picked them up and put them in the bin. Why on earth people couldn't do that in the first place, I don't know. And the same when you go into Cribblegate Park, it's full of McDonald's papers, sometimes right next to a bin. So why on earth are people completely incapable of walking those few extra steps and putting it into the bin? And maybe we do need to look at some sort of education message within the scheme. I know it's included, but I think we need to probably widen that a bit more. And finally, my last suggestion would be some members may have seen the details in the Worcester News of Charlotte Maloney a couple of months ago. A 9-year-old girl from St John's who received a St John's Councillor's Medal for good citizenship. She collects 4 bin liners full of rubbish every Sunday, walking through St John's with a litter picker. A fantastic example to a generation, and I'm pleased to say that a head teacher at St Clement's Primary School have also recognised her. But I do wonder whether we can actually look at individuals like Charlotte Maloney in some sort of civic response and civic recognition, which we could actually go a bit further with to actually congratulate them and encourage them a bit more than handing out prizes for the first 200 people to use it on a website, on Facebook, on social media. I think there needs to be a little bit more recognition of the people who already do that kind of work. I hope I'm not being too negative. I'm trying to be helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. I thought when you were mentioning a local celebrity, you're going to offer yourself in that role. But just as a personal comment, I think when you say you find people, someone's dumped 4 pizza boxes, I personally don't think that those people think that dropping litter's a good thing. I'm sure people know it's the wrong thing to do. It doesn't stop them doing it. But I'll ask David if he wants to comment on any of the points Richard's made.
Thank you. Some really useful points there. You're right. I mean, the key is the engagement in the schools, the peer pressure. And Charlotte Maloney clearly will have a big impact on the rest of the children in her class and her school from the great work that she's doing, and with more emphasis through community action. There's elders and role models in the community will have more influence. But some really good ideas there, and certainly the civic recognition. I know the volunteer thank you event that the community team every year is really well attended, and actually that would be a vehicle, I think, to include this in. So we certainly wouldn't get some celebrity endorsement through our work with the BBC as well.
I suppose also with one of the points of the neighbourhood place working teams, integrate more with local volunteers, so that could be part of it as well. Simon?
Yes, I think littering tends to be an impulsive thing. I'm not sure that somebody who drops litter is going to engage with Snapchat, whatever it might be, and be influenced by that. They just do this without thinking, and it's careless and ignorant behaviour. What I think may be a more effective way of intercepting that thought process is just have more signage around. And that could be a mixture of sure, have signs reminding people there's a £100 fixed penalty notice for littering, but also some positive signs about, you know, to remind people to take pride in their city. I know, I think this is on the boundary of Worcester. I'm not sure whether it's actually included in Worcester, but I think you've mentioned this before, the A449 between Claines and the motorway junction, which is a notorious, horrible stretch of road where people, I'm sure people go there with sacks full of rubbish and tip it out of their cars as they're going along. That stretch of road needs to have signs that people can read as they're driving along to remind them that clearing up that litter endangers people's lives, causes the road to be partially closed to protect the litter pickers. And in the meantime, it's an absolute eyesore, not a very nice entry to the city. But around the city centre, I think we need to have a mixture of positive and warning signs, get it into people's consciousness, so that if anybody does go ahead and throw litter on the ground, a bit more aware of doing it than just doing it without thought. The other thing, which I'm afraid is one of the worst producers of litter, has just come back. Winter break in, don't know where they go, but those abominable creatures are already ripping open bags. I saw an absolute heap of rubbish in the middle of town, which clearly come from a bag which had been ripped open. Another issue there, but I think we have talked about issuing Hessian sacks to premises that have a problem. I do think we need to be reminding premises that are blighted with this problem that it is their responsibility to stop it.
Just again to say thank you. Some really points there. I think with signage and the work we've done, there's always a balance between signs becoming litter, because there's a plethora of them and too many, and keeping them fresh so that things change and then people notice them and then they see them. But certainly that, I think we can try and talk to Highways colleagues around some of the vehicle signage, the illuminated signage. Now a lot of effort goes into cleaning the ring roads and the A449, and that is done absolutely safely, and it does involve road closures. So, yeah. That is being looked at. Sending that.
And also we've maintained the additional sort of hit squad in the city centre to help keep the streets clean. Yeah. Andy, yeah, did you want to say anything?
Yeah. I just, on the signs, I'm with you, the signs are, you know, if somebody's going to throw something down, they don't look at the sign, I don't think, and say, oh, no, better not, because it says don't do it. I did like the sign I saw the other day, which was a mock-up of, with a picture of the Russian leader's face on a receptacle, and it was called a Putin. On the legal side of this, I thought you're aggregating responsibility a little tiny bit, because we've, under licensing, people have got the responsibility, fast food engines, and we could probably put in there a bit more about enforcement as well, because I don't know, as we are always, as far as prosecutions for litter is concerned, I know they don't happen, and if they do happen, there's a hue and cry, because it turns out to be some poor lady who can hardly afford it is being fined 70 quid for dropping a fag end or something on it. But there we are. On the, I think we ought to be up to speed with fast food outlets. I'm absolutely online. Richard and I are absolutely online with this being in line with the Queen's Jubilee. That's a cracking idea to do that. But can I there's something that's bothering me about this, and I'll tell you what it is. In the area that I live in, we've got a rubbish collection group volunteers called the Wombles. Okay. And then you've got another group, a sort of provisional wing of the Wombles, and they go out and collect. And then you've got individuals who do it as well. And that's been community led. And and it's supported by the Duckworth Trust. And this isn't the ubiquitous councillor standing for election who stood there wondering which end of the blinking liberty pick to stick. These are people who do it all the time, not just in the lead of an election, you know. And it sort of implies that we don't not recognising that in a way. So my point is, long way round to it, those initiatives which are very effective are community led. And I think that's where this is going. But on the basis where it's community led, our areas which are most problematic, there is no community. It's places that we visit rather than where we live. So I don't know quite how you square that circle.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely the community work that's going on at the moment is what we're looking to, I guess, promote. So we'll use some of that as examples and engender that. Very good point around local communities in areas that are more public, and there isn't there as such. We won't be able to address every square inch of the city with this, but certainly we can make a big bang around this, a big noise around it.
Okay. Any more comments or questions? So, on the basis that David's taken a note of comments raised, and obviously welcome to contact him with any other thoughts directly, are we happy to approve the recommendation that the committee supports the proposal set out in this paper to help reduce the prevalence of litter in Worcester? All those in favour? Is that everyone? Yep, that's everyone. Marvellous. Okay. So on to agenda item 8, which is an update on the delivery and management of allotments. At the last meeting, we said goodbye to Phil Gilmore, and this evening we can welcome Sandra Green as our new permanent replacement, but with a wider remit than I think Phil was covering. So Sandra's, as well as cleaner and greener, also responsible for parking and enforcement, the crematorium and the cemeteries, and possibly much more. So perhaps Sandra could, before you introduce the item, you might also introduce yourself first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Sandra Green, Head of City Services. Coming from Wigan, so I apologise for this northern accent, and I'll try and slow it down so you can understand me. I don't come with subtitles, I'm afraid. I have a background in cleaner, safer, greener, parking enforcement, litter enforcement, and also bereavement services was my portfolio in Wigan. So I'm hoping that I do bring some knowledge and expertise to this service, and I'll obviously look forward to working with quite a lot of the ward members along the way. I know I've met a couple of you online, albeit at the moment, but it's been really helpful and useful. So I'm really looking forward to this challenge, this role. Okay. I suppose before I just move on to this report, I'd just like to take Richard's point on board. We had something called Waste Warrior in Wigan, so that was really a good mascot to get the young people working with us and doing the littering. So I'll see if I can borrow it if you would like to obviously pick that role up in the future. That was a serious... That's a very good point. Okay, so I'm giving you an update on the delivery and management of allotments, and obviously new in role. I think I'm in 5th week at this moment in time, so I have brought Thalia along with me, who is my expert in this field, and will be able to probably field a lot of the questions. It's okay. So this report is obviously for the committee to note the work that's been undertaken on the allotment management since November of last year. So following obviously the formal review, the delivery of the allotments, we have that dedicated resource now that is there to support the members and those tenants within the allotments across the city. We've looked at new tenancy agreements and they've been all finalised in December of last year, and obviously the tenants have been advised of the new agreements that are going to be coming into force in July this year. And also we've looked at the new tenancy agreement that has now come into force with immediate effect. So some of the work that Thalia has been doing in her role is obviously looking at that digital format. We've updated the web pages, so we've got a bit more informative content on the sites, the location maps, obviously monthly figures for waiting lists. So it's been really useful to update on a digital front. And also we've been looking at putting the allotment agreements and procedures that they've also been updated and put up on that web page. So we've brought it into the 21st century and really revitalised that digital element. As part, obviously, of revitalising, the forum's now no longer in operation, and obviously the site reps are forming groups to discuss events and other issues that Thalia is supporting quite closely. And obviously the concessions have been removed from plot holders residing outside of the city boundary, with only one concession still applying, and implementation for new invoices were being raised in October's payment. The other thing that we've been looking at quite closely is around the new guidance that's going to be issued to the site reps. So there's some key pieces of work that's been undertaken. One's been around bonfires, obviously livestock applications, and also shed guidance that I think Thalia has become quite an expert on as she's been putting all this information together. And also, we've introduced the tenants dispute procedure, which seems to be going quite well. We've only had 3 disputes so far. And again, this procedure is also on the website so that people can obviously know how to take things forward should they find themselves in dispute within the allotments. And we've also introduced quarterly meetings with the representatives, and I think that's been received quite well by everybody, and that formal process has been embedded within the guidance notes. Any questions have been raised and any progress reports are now going to be delivered through that established format. Obviously, the Minor Works team have been looking at some of the issues that have been raised, and I think one of those around the notice boards and making sure that they're fit for purpose and are utilised by the tenants and site reps. And then also we've been doing the RSPB volunteer surveys, and that's taking place with the tenants being encouraged to take part. So we're currently collating all that information together, and that will be shared with community engagement, but also obviously the tenants as well that's been part of that process. And then I suppose one of the major issues for us has been around site security and antisocial behaviour. So these are currently high on the agenda of the allotment officer. But obviously do not include the 2 self-managed sites. It's the ones that we're managing. We've had some input from West Mercia Police, from the Rural Business Crime Officer, who's given some basic crime prevention advice, which has been quite useful, and looking at things like the smart water markup, looking at anti-crime stuff. The gaps within the fences, that the egresses are quite easily accessible for people to get into the sites. So that's something that we've been working quite closely with. And I think one of the big things is, and I'm very keen on the volunteer aspect and people obviously working with the council, looking at some self-help measures that the tenants and site representatives could do for themselves. So, for example, making sure that they don't leave the valuables within the sheds, etc., and that they are taking responsibility for locking things up. So that's been quite helpful, and I think that's been well received. So looking further, so for the next 3 to 6 months, we've got quite a few work streams, and we're going to be quite busy looking at these. We're currently looking at the allocations policy. That's going to be reviewed on looking at the handbook, site representation induction pack. So we think that will be a really good piece of work to take things forward and make sure that we've got that smooth running with the allotments and the tenants. So we're looking at towards June that will be available, and obviously we're happy to share that with committee members once that is obviously available, but we will be putting it on the website to get that digital focus. We are also going to be doing the eDNA survey on the Great Crested Newt, and that is going to be taking place on one of our sites in April. And again, we'll feed back once we've got the outcome of that survey. Fidel, you might want to touch a little bit more on that if people would like to know a bit more. And one of the big things is promoting that community grants to the site reps, offering £100 for assistance with any events that they want to look at from the allotments. So we really want to bolster the work of the site reps and take that forward to get that community cohesion. And then again, also we're looking at plans for the Worcester show and the Malvern show. And it's a pity Paul's not here, because I think it has been music to his ears. The biodiversity is going to be one of the key themes for the allotment officer this year. So we're currently working with Claire to see how we can focus on that within the sites, looking at the wildlife habitats. And that'll be in obviously partnership with Paul, Wildlife Trust, and Claire and also Thala. So obviously, these are just informations for noting, because I think the committee asked to give an update once we put the officer in post.
Thank you very much. That's pretty good for 5 weeks in post.
I can take no credit.
Tom, questions?
Thanks, Andy. So first of all, thank you for the update and for getting up to speed with this so quickly. And I'm also really pleased to see that we're looking forward, and that handbook work sounds really good, that we're going to keep building on the foundation we've now established and make sure that we create a really excellent community and really healthy there. That's fantastic. I'm sure other members have got things that are pertinent and important to talk about, so I want to get the administrative issues out of the way first. But I think there's probably a point of accuracy on 3.1b in the report that it's worth us mopping up before we have this as a kind of received and accepted paper, which is that we have not disestablished the forum because the forum wasn't actually a council entity. Not in our power to disestablish it. Maybe it's worth noting that it no longer has a role in our management structure for the allotments, but it's not ours to disestablish. So either we could strike item B there, or we could just change it with a statement that the forum no longer plays a role in our. That's just a point of accuracy, really.
Yeah, I guess it's semantics. Obviously, from reporting, doing the report myself, obviously not understanding the standings within this committee. So I do apologise for that. So I think, yeah, it's no longer a role. I think it's probably better worded. Thank you.
Richard?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we heard earlier from Mr Alfrey. I think we as councillors have got a job to do to help Mr Alfrey overcome some of his issues, and Rob and Matt and I will continue to do that to the best of our ability, which may include some management of expectations. But there are a number of issues which he continually, and others on Windsor Avenue plot, continue to raise with us, where developers previously made promises which were not kept, and we as an authority failed to actually ensure that we gained agreements about those promises in writing. Therefore, we're unable to contractually oblige them to carry those issues out. So mistakes have been made, and I think we do need to see how we can rectify those mistakes. We will try and do our best to do so with minimal spend, but it may be a necessity to make up for where our developers have failed to fulfil their agreements, and we failed to actually ensure that they could do so. So I'm looking forward to trying resolving this once and for all, but I somehow doubt we will get all the issues resolved. But I'm looking forward to trying and ensure we step forward and work forward with it in a way which can be accepted by the tenants on that allotment site.
Thank you, Chair. And I think we recognise as officers there are probably a number of outstanding queries that we're probably yet to fully bottom out. From an officer point of view, we'll continue to work with partners to try and bring about resolutions that meet allotment holders' expectations. But as you say, Councillor Udall, I think there will come a point where we will do all we can. We will have exhausted any influence we have. And hopefully at that point we can accept that's where we've got to, but we'll continue to try within the powers we have.
Louise?
Thanks. Welcome to Worcester, Sandra. From one fellow northerner to another. It's not very exciting here, unfortunately. I'm sorry, when you come from the bright lights of Manchester. Well, I just wanted to say, this is my last Environment Committee meeting, so I'm going to say what I think, which I usually do anyway, but I think you've done a really, really good job, Lloyd, and Phil beforehand, with dealing with this allotment stuff. As an allotment plot holder, and as somebody who sat on that steering group, it has been difficult to manage. There's a lot of personalities on the allotments, so good luck, Sandra. Thalia, we've already had conversations, and know you're very well aware of the different personalities there. I think the fact that things have moved so quickly is really a testament to how much work has gone into this, because one thing that I've seen in my 4 years on this council is that stuff moves at an absolutely glacial pace. So to be able to have done this in, a year and a half while we were in lockdown as well, I think it's pretty amazing. So huge credit to you, Lloyd, and your team for managing this. I think it's been great. The one thing that I would say, though, is that I think there is still some discord between tenants and the council. I think there's been a number of issues raised in recent months with letters that have gone out to tenants threatening eviction, which really have been quite heavy-handed, and they've not really been very well received. And then it's taken a long time for them to then be sort of recontacted to say that things are okay. And, you know, I've had a number of people contact me over the past few weeks as we're getting into growing season, saying, I don't know if I should start sowing my seeds or not, because I don't actually know if I've got a plot, because I've been threatened with eviction and nobody's come back and told me if I've actually got a plot still. And I think a number of those issues have been rectified now, but it is, you know, I think that there has been a number of concerns over the years where we've not maybe kept on top of stuff on the allotments, and it's been left to the site reps, who, to be frank, have been a bunch of people who have thought they've had more power than really they have, and they've sort of run it, and they've been allowed to run it when they probably shouldn't have been allowed to. But I do now think that we need to maintain that and understand that stuff has happened that really shouldn't have been allowed to get away with. But I think it's all about, you know, most plot holders have not had any engagement with the forum. They've not wanted to get involved in the politics of it. They just want to go and grow. And now some are being told that they're potentially getting evicted because of various issues that they didn't really realise were issues in the first place. So there's, you know, I think there's some issues there still. But generally speaking, I'm quite excited to see how it all plays out over the next couple of years, because I love my allotment, and I know most people do love their allotments, and they're a really great asset for the council. And, you know, it's been an amazing piece of work to be part of. So well done to the whole environment team, really, for it. And well done to Tom and Andy and Joy previously for steering us through it.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Did anyone want to say anything officer-wise specific on any of the issues raised? No? No, okay. Out there then. Andy?
Just briefly, first, good luck. if if you aim to make everybody happy, you forget it. But I'm sure that you'll make things better. And it's also fair to say that it's not all doom and gloom. The Worcester show, which was an event with 3 carrots in a tent on the local park, is now a real success, you know, and that's the same team that's doing it. But the specific question, in Suffolk, I don't know if you've seen this, on the BBC and in the Telegraph, I suppose, and other papers today, I'd never heard of this one before. Woodbridge and Suffolk have made a decision to put a cap on the length of allotment tenancies, and after 5 years you lose, you know, that's it. Yeah. No, I'd never heard that one before, Lloyd, but the only reason I'm raising it is in case we are asked if we would do something similar, which I hope we wouldn't.
Yeah, I can imagine, Chair, that's probably to do with churn. You know, if you look at Worcester's waiting list, I think when we did the piece of work, we had several hundred people on our waiting list, which I can imagine is frustrating. But I think one of the things that we committed to was protecting the rights of existing plot holders. And what we have said is we'll keep the allotment policy under review and not let it sit idle. So something we can think about in the future. But I think the commitment was last time round that we protect the rights of existing tenants who are good plot holders.
And certainly a change like that would have to come through committee and through public consultation. Robin.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the reports as well. Who knew allotment politics could be so much fun? During the consultation exercise, we saw some feedback from plot holders suggesting that the allotment engagement forum should have a wider engagement than just the site reps. And I'm wondering if, I mean, it was just consultation responses. Just wondering if if officers have any thoughts on that, on whether they're going to widen the allotment engagement meetings to include plot holders and, God forbid, some councillors maybe.
Thank you. You've asked me this question previously. I need to look at, I don't think everybody needs to be invited to every meeting. I think if it's relevant or there's something that you can bring, if I give you the dates of the meetings and then anything you want to contribute beforehand may be of use to the meeting, and then if I think it is relevant, maybe send invites to a wider audience. But I don't think it's necessary to invite everybody along for every quarterly meeting, because it's essential the site reps come along, and maybe even deputy site reps, because it's my chance and their chance to discuss issues that are ongoing on the sites they volunteer on. So I think it's useful, and I will bear it in mind, but I think for now, not for every meeting and only as and when.
Okay, thanks, Simon.
Richard?
This was in my notes to raise earlier and I completely forgot, and comments by Andy reminded me. It's the issue about the acquisition and development of new allotment sites. We have got that very long waiting list. There are a lot of people asking for them, and we simply can't meet the demand. Now, in the past, we did suggest that we should use the planning process to try and acquire some new allotment sites through whatever methods and 106 agreements or whatever we can use to actually do that. I do wonder whether that's any further thought has been given to that area about new potential allotment sites, and whether we've got any land ourselves which could actually be utilised in such a way, whether that's land anywhere within the city which we could transfer to allotment use.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. I'm not aware of any live conversations around the procurement or acquisition of land for allotments. Councillor Udall raises planning regime, and obviously with new planning developments, depending on their size, depending on the location, that may present opportunities. And I think as part of the conversation around strategic play on Monday night, somebody talked about the sort of conflicting pressures on available land, so play, conservation, allotments. But I think it's something we can certainly take away and have a think about, and perhaps come back and talk with Chair and Vice Chair at some future date.
Tom?
Just a supplementary point to that, really, and maybe also talk to some of the social housing organisations that own land that could be repurposed as well.
Simon?
Yeah, on that thought, I know for sure, having heard what Richard just said, there's a little piece of land in my ward which would seem ideally suited to not a very big allotment site, but it may be that members around the room can identify little parcels of land. They may not be the sort of size that we typically look at, but do we have to have an allotment site that 20 allotments? We could perhaps produce some suggestions ourselves as to little pieces of land.
Do we have any more comments or questions? Okay, so on that basis, are we happy to note the contents of the report as amended, as with the amendment suggested by Tom, and clarifying section 3B regarding the establishment of the forum? So, can we note that? Yep. Noted. Thank you. Okay, we're now on to agenda item 9, the proposed committee performance scorecard. Lloyd will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. I won't spend a huge amount of time on this report, but happy to obviously take any questions or thoughts from members. So this is the proposed committee scorecard for this committee for 22-23, and proposed to kick in from the 1st of April. Appendix 1 is the document that I draw members' attention to. And just running through the proposed key projects and activities for next year as proposed. You'll see there the 5 projects that we are proposing that continue to remain on the scorecard, which is the Environmental Sustainability Action Plan, Purdeswell Phase 2, Riverside Park improvements, the Public Bin Investment Programme, and the Green Homes Grant Local Authority Delivery Scheme. If I just jump to the items that we're proposing to remove first of all before coming back to the new ones. You'll see there a mix of projects that have either been completed, moved to a different committee, or form part of something that's already a bigger piece of work within the existing projects. So I won't dwell on those too much, but the one I will pick up on is the Bereavement Services Facilities Review. So that's previously been an item on the committee scorecard. We've probably not managed members' expectations very well around that. We've sort of bumped it up the road, but we're certainly more aware now of how complicated that project is and how much thought that needs to go into it. And obviously the other pertinent point about that project is it is highly commercially sensitive. So we don't want to be playing out a conversation in public around what we do next. That there is a need to sort of protect that conversation, and that could be through member briefings or through reports on pink papers. So we're also proposing that comes off the key project list. The ones that we are proposing for 22-23 are around trying to achieve green flag for Astwood Cemetery. It's been an aspiration for some time. We focused on some of our premier parks first, but we think we're in a really good place to be able to take that forward. A car park signage project. Those of you that use our car parks may know that our signage could do with upgrading, modernising, and there's some work underway around that already. Particularly with our new EV charging points and bringing things up to speed. Obviously, we've made some inroads around ward level biodiversity action plans, the way we cut grass, the way we manage green spaces, and we want to roll that out across the city, across each ward, in a similar sort of vein as what we did with the Public Bin Investment Programme. So come and talk to members, ward councillors about what we can do. We want to just tweak our waste and recycling collection schedule, just to provide a bit more resilience. So that's not a huge change. It will have very minimal customer impact, but we feel that's a key enough project for to have member oversight. And obviously we've got the significant tree planting regime this year connected to the Queen's Green Canopy Award. So we also think that is worthy of inclusion within the projects as well. Chair, I just wonder, shall I stop there and we talk about the projects first before going on to the performance indicators? So happy to take any questions.
Do you have any questions on items raised so far?
The proposed indicators for next year, then members will note that we are proposing to include a significant number of the indicators that we included last year and that were approved, and we're not intending on changing any of the targets there. I know there's questions asked quite generally around recycling targets, and again, we're not proposing to change those for next year. But now Sandra is in, I think there's a conversation we need to have with the County Council around sort of recycling incentives. At the moment, we don't receive any incentives to increase our recycling. And so I think we've got ourselves into a bit of a position of just providing the service we provide without really sort of driving the message. So it's something for us next year that we'd like to get into more conversations around what we can do. And then perhaps for the following year, review that recycling target 12 months down the line. So many are staying the same, Chair. Again, page 15 of the pack, I draw your attention to a couple of new KPIs that we're proposing. Number of missed bin collections, we dropped off a couple of years ago, but it is a really important one for us. You know, we do particularly well around this. And therefore we'd like to reinsert it back into the scorecard. Just to bring members up to speed, the previous target was 0.2%. So again, we'd like to reapply that for this year. So the target in practical terms would be, you know, we collect from 46,000 dwellings a week, whether that's black bin or green bin, and our target would be not to exceed 0.2% of collections. And at the moment, we run anywhere between 0.01 and 0.06, depending on the time of year. Satisfaction with cemeteries and crematorium. This is an annual indicator, but it just felt a little bit strange that it's such a key service for us. It's such a sensitive service for us. We didn't have something on this committee scorecard. So we're proposing we drop in the annual satisfaction with the cemeteries and crematorium. That's picked up as part of the annual survey. And we've discussed tonight the Cleaner City campaign. And one of the things that we'd like to introduce, if members are minded to, are the number of environmental fixed penalty notices that we issue. Now that we are coming out of the pandemic and life is seemingly getting back to normal again, there is a need for us to combine enforcement work with that sort of softer work as well around messaging and communication. And having spoken to officers, I think previously we had a target of 50. What we're proposing this time around, Chair, is a target of 40 per month, just to take into account that, you know, footfall perhaps still isn't back to where it was, and we're still in the midst of what we call dual training our staff as well. So all our CEOs very soon will be able to deal with parking offences and environmental offences. And then the last four, Chair, very quickly. One of the things we had previously, and we're proposing to remove, is a whole host of indicators that probably needed reading 10 or 11 times to get your head around. What we want to do is replace those with the four on page 15. And basically what these will do, these will hopefully bring to members' attention both the quality of our street cleansing work and the quantity. So we want to be able to present the percentage of streets assessed as excellent or acceptable, both within the city centre as one indicator, and then across our other our outside places as a separate indicator. But also the final two indicators, if we're committing to undertake 20 assessments per month, we want you to hold us to account on that. So the last two indicators there will just provide the sort of raw numbers of the amount of actual street assessments that are being carried out against target, and those numbers are still to be worked up, Chair. So I know Sandra and officers are currently considering those, and we can update members when we reach. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Robin?
Amongst the indicators that are staying the same, it's the carbon emissions. Staying at 1,420 tonnes, I think. Given that we've declared a climate emergency and we want to achieve net zero by 2030, is that consistent with that ambition?
Chair, if I may defer to David on this one. And I can remember this very question being asked last time around, I think. I was scrambling for the answer, but I'm going to put David on the spot.
Thank you, Lloyd. I don't think I was at the last committee, so I think rather than trying to give you an answer off the cuff, I think it's probably best we take that one away and come back with it. I understand, I absolutely understand the sentiment of the question. Whether more challenging than that. I think there's a fair amount of background information that would give you as part of the answer.
Simon?
Yeah, I just want to ask, on page 15, satisfaction with cemeteries and crematorium is 60%. Is that not setting the bar a little bit low? What exactly does that mean? We'd be expecting to go a little bit higher than that.
I think it's a good point, Chair. I think what we've done for this report is we've simply picked up what's included in the annual survey that we out as a council, and so the connection it has to Policy and Resources Committee. So I can go back and double check that one, Chair, as to the exact detail of it. But this is what we've lifted from the annual, the annual process the council carries out.
Tom?
It was on the previous point, actually, Robin's point. I was going to suggest that, well, first of all, the number probably should be 1,260. But could we minute it that is pending review when we accept this item? So it's very clear that is open and we haven't endorsed the 1,420.
What I was going to suggest is, given that there's been a couple of questions raised that haven't been answered, and we've got a lot of TBCs on here, that we bring it back to Chair and Vice Chair for final approval once the TBCs have been completed and the queries answered. Any other questions or comments? Okay, then. So on the basis that it will be come back to myself and Tom for final approval, we're happy to approve the recommendation as written at 1.1. All those in favour? Yeah, subject. Yeah. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Can I thank you, Chair, for chairing these meetings and putting up with me so tactfully over the past year. So thank you very much for the work you've done.
Thank you. And and thank you everyone for your work this year. And we'll see some of you back next year, I imagine. So thank you very much and good night.